Fabrice, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Damhurst podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And would you mind if you would mind giving us a brief overview of your journey into the insurance industry? I asked this question in the context, in my nearly 15 years of doing this role, I'm yet to meet anyone who's chosen to join the insurance industry. Everybody seems to have fallen into it. You might be the first to have grown up wanting to be in insurance, but if you could just give us an overview of how you got into the industry, that would
Sure.
be
No, look, I'm not going to break the trend, I must say. I came into the industry a little by accident, and certainly when I was growing up, I had no idea about the insurance industry. Beyond my parents sort of buying insurance that they needed. What happened? I guess I was born and raised in France, and so studied, and I was quite a happy kid at school, to be honest. Things were going well, and I think the French system is very much geared towards selection of pupils, and if you do well at maths, that's sort of something that gives you options, basically. So I was just sort of drifted into doing maths, and really enjoyed it, but also studied like Latin and history and things I enjoyed, and I ended up doing preparatory schools for what we call the Grandes Écoles, and took the exams there, and ended up in the military university, which is a very, very French thing, quite prestigious. You get to walk, you got a uniform, you walk on the Champs-Élysées for Bastille Day and that sort of thing.
Wow.
So parents are very, very proud of you when you get there. But that's very much a generalist school where you do maths and all sorts of sciences. And initially, when I went there, I didn't really have any idea what I would do. I tried to do a bit of physics, did a bit of work with CERN, but I realized that I was quite average, basically. And then I discovered macroeconomics. Microeconomics I really liked. And then I did a degree in stats and economics, and as part of that, there was an opportunity to do more actuarial studies. So I did that on commodities and investment. And then at the end of my studies, I really didn't know what I was going to do, to be honest. And what happened is that in the last year at university, we had some media training, in fact, by a part of Watson White at the time, so part of Willis Towers Watson now. And they said to me, well, we're interested in a quant profile. Do you want to come and work in the Paris office? But there's only one catch, is that you need to come to Reigate, the head office, for 1 year for training. And that's what happened. So I crossed the channel and started working there as a consultant. And that's how I fell into insurance.
Oh wow! And Reigate, I can only imagine a little different from Paris, or
it was quite different. I remember my first day, 4th of August 1997. So I woke up. Listened to the radio. It was the birthday of the Queen Mum, so they played the national anthem. I remember that my first day. I think
that's very British.
Right, exactly. And then went into the office, and that was really, really interesting, because the first 6 months I was doing live consulting, and the first thing is I joined the graduate cohort, and everybody introduced themselves. In a very British way, a little self-deprecating. They mentioned which football team they were supporting. They were Scottish. They were supporting like a team in Scotland, one down here, and so on. And it was very, very different to what I was expecting. So I had to sort of learn. Well, first I had to unlearn the English I'd learned at university, because it was quite very formal. Colloquial English, very formal, and so on, not what we use, and then just to learn a little bit what it would be to be a sort of a British graduate, and so that was interesting. A lot of learning at the time, and I think I was really lucky to fall into consulting, because I think it's as training ground, it was very, very fertile.
I can imagine. Yeah. What type of businesses were you projects were you getting involved with?
Quite a lot of M&A at the time, valuation of portfolios, and programming, coding at the time was a big part of what I was doing. And then after 6 months, I moved to the non-life side, which frankly I felt really much happier in, because it was my background of doing statistics. So we did a lot of personalized pricing, generalized linear models with the technique that was sort of basically the computing power was such that you could start to use these techniques. And I was looking after the French clients, so we spent a lot of time in Paris and in New York, which is in the west of France, where a lot of the big mutuals are based. And so that was really, really interesting. At the same time, some of the clients of Watson Wyatt were, in fact, there were two really interesting clients. There was Direct Line, who was fairly new, and people were concerned about, it's growing fast, and is it going to be a sound insurance company? So, so Watson Wyatt were signing off the reserves of Direct Line. And the second client, which was an early lesson, was Independent Insurance. Who was Company of the Year. So when I started, and obviously had a few bumps on the road later on. So they were like early lessons, I would say, in risk management.
And I'm shocked that you aren't still in Reigate. I'm shocked that you sort of made the move up to London. How's your career evolved since those early days? And
so I think I was really happy at Watson Wyatt. Learned a lot, at great mentors right from the beginning, good leaders. But I think after a while I realized that I probably wouldn't make it to partner, because I think it was quite a traditional firm, and I had a little of an exotic background in Reigate. So I moved to AXA. In fact, I applied directly to AXA, but that didn't work out. But a consultant called me and said, "Look, there's an opportunity at AXA," and that's when I moved. I moved there, which was really interesting, because AXA itself had just purchased Guardian. And was busy merging different direct portfolios. So what I knew from pricing was really useful there. And little by little, I became the Chief Actuary, and also sort of right-hand man for the CFO. So I also got the opportunity to lead some of the FP&A, some of the monthly reporting. So I did lots of different things at AXA, and I really enjoyed working.
And how did you find that? So that first leadership role as Chief Actuary, as right-hand man to the CFO, as you said, how did you find that first step up from maybe a management role prior to that into a leadership role? How was that transition for you?
I think it sort of happened quite naturally. I mean, I think one thing that was really, really useful, as I mentioned, in France, I had done my military service and it was a longer one because of the military university. So I had 1 year there when I was just 20, and had to manage in army style of about 40 people that were older than me and coming from all sort of background. So that had given me a little bit of an experience of how can you lead people that are older than you, that know more than you, and that some of them didn't get on well, some of them. And you had the structure of the army that was quite helpful, in fact. So, and also again in the consulting world, I'd seen sort of really, really good leaders, but in a system that was maybe a little bit less formal than, certainly less formal than the army, but also less formal than in the company. So I thought that they were, I guess I picked up things from good leaders. And the teams at the beginning I was leading were small. I mean, my first team at AXA was only 3 people. And so it, in a way, I find that managing a small team is more difficult than managing a large team.
Really?
Because you're much more like people dependent. And do people get on and so on. When larger scale, in a way, it's you remove from the day-to-day problems that managers have to deal with.
It's less intense, I can imagine.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm just really interested in how you've mentioned a couple of times now at Wyatt Watson, you had sort of good leaders, good mentors, and what was it about those people? What were some of the competencies, I suppose, or the visible skill sets that they kind of showed you that you've sort of taken forward in your own career? What was it that you think, fostered that in you?
I think what I really always appreciated is that they had a lot of experience, but they were always very, very humble.
Okay.
And always sort of thinking, okay, I'm not going to project what I already know. I'm just going to try and come at a problem with a blank mind and just try to absorb what it is and so on. So putting aside the sort of a priori, I think also they were always very approachable. And they like spending time with other people, basically. So, despite being actuaries, maybe not the most gregarious of folks. In fact, they did quite enjoy sort of learning from others, confronting ideas, finding people to disagree with in an intelligent way, because they knew they were going to learn something from it. So I think that was that was good. And also, something that always fascinated me in that consulting world is that the firm was extremely successful financially, but they never talked about money. And it was all about what we call the client first. So make sure that the client is well looked after, gets exactly what they need, and then the money will sort of follow. And I thought that was
it's good advice.
Approach.
No, definitely. And you mentioned in that first AXA role as chief actuary, you were managing people that maybe were older than you, that had more experience than you, that maybe knew a lot more. How did you manage that dynamic as a first-time C-suite leader? How did you manage that dynamic?
Well, I think you got your strengths in that. Obviously, a certain part of the business reasonably well, so that you can have a good conversation. But I think, for example, dealing with underwriters, they will always know so much more about their book than you will ever do, and also they tend to be quite protective. Their book is a little bit like their baby and so on. So if you come along and you just say, "Oh, your baby is ugly," then they're not going to be very, 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 very happy. But if you say, "Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?" And by the way, you rely on an IT person, and you rely on marketing, and how do you work together, and so on. So I think, and maybe that's something that came from the from the consulting background, is thinking, how do you add value to someone from their point of view. So yes, you might ask a few annoying questions, but at the end of the day, you're going to help them achieve what they want to do, but maybe come up with some novel ideas too.
Fine. And therefore, so how many years were you chief actuary at AXA before kind of the move to AIG?
I think it was about 8 years altogether that I was there, but the company changed a lot. And one thing that was really interesting at AXA is that we took over a company called SwiftCover, which was one of the early internet-only companies. And it was fascinating. I mean, they were using, for example, Iggy Pop. Was
I remember
person. And that was, you imagine the AXA logo and the AXA discipline and Iggy Pop, they didn't exactly live in the same universe. So I was helping a little bit with the liaison and bringing good practices between the two. So that was one of the things I did then. I guess one of the early sort of insurtechs, integration in the big insurers. So I worked on a number of different projects. I think that's why I stayed relatively long at AXA, because I really enjoyed the AXA structure. I mean, AXA grew through acquisition and has been really, really successful at integrating company, and I think a good technical discipline around it.
Okay. And how was the move from AXA to AIG? Was that the transition into risk management?
It was, yeah. Well, in fact, when I moved from AXA to AIG, it was still for an actuarial role first. And what happened is that, in fact, sort of AXA was selling its life companies in the UK and was sort of getting smaller.
Yeah.
And I was very happy and settled in the UK, so I didn't want to go back to Paris. As a family, was not sort of the right time for us. So and AIG was 2011 when I moved. So AIG was sort of post crisis in recovery mode. So I went there and I became the Chief Actuary for Europe, Middle East and Africa. And then after 6 months, the CEO at the time asked me to also lead with the risk function, because the risk function, the leadership wasn't quite working there, and he also asked me to lead solvency too. So I was wearing like three hats. Yeah, that's when I moved to the risk side.
And what do you think they saw in you to, allow you to wear those three hats?
Well, I don't think, again, I ask questions and I sort of try to come up with pragmatic solutions or some business solution. I mean, you take the Solvency II program. It was crazy, to be honest. It had 100 contractors working on it with no real direction, and I got that down to 2 a period of time. But when I was, and just also thinking, okay, what are the competencies we need on an ongoing basis, and it just needed a bit of structure and someone who I guess I worked with others on that, and I got exec sponsorship from the beginning. And I think within the company also, I think most of the companies, all the companies I worked with, are quite meritocratic. If you need sort of a good track record and give you more responsibilities and trust you. So I enjoyed also the fact that I had quite a lot of freedom to do things how I wanted them to be done, basically.
Good.
And obviously, fast forward, international CRO at AIG, moved to group CRO role at Hiscox, FTSE 100 company. When you sort of look back to your school days, your military days, did you ever see yourself becoming a leader, at the board table, a decision maker rather than a decision taker? Was that ever on your agenda?
Not particularly, to be honest. I think when you look back, you sort of see, career sort of makes sense when you look backwards. When you look forward, not necessarily, but you pick up different things that are complementary, hopefully, in there. I mean, but I think I would say I was quite inspired early on by these leaders that I saw, and I said, okay, well, what I quite like what they're doing. How can I be a bit like them? And it's come in many different ways, and also, frankly, learning from people I didn't necessarily like, but were really successful at something. And that's okay. I don't necessarily want to be that person, but they're really good at selling. They're really good at stakeholder management. They're very, what makes them good. And it's a little bit where I can force my own nature to be a bit more like them when I need to be.
So almost sort of cherry picking kind of the skill sets and the people within an organization that are good at something and trying to sort of mirror and copy.
Yeah, that's right. Or avoid being like some of the because you also learn a bit in the negative. But I think that's right. And some of it was formal, like through mentoring. Got some coaching too. That was very helpful at a certain stage in my career. But also I find people are quite generous with their time. If you ask, and there's still people that I use as sounding board basically, and when I need to make a big decision, and people that I don't deal with sort of day to day, because then I think they've got more distance from it, and that's really useful.
And on the mentoring, what was it that, from a coaching perspective, that made you think, I had to adapt?
I mean, the coaching was mostly during AXA Day, sort of, as you said, stepping into the C-suite sort of level, and that was useful, I think, in terms of stakeholder management. Which then in my next role at AIG was really useful, because AIG was so big that you needed to align a lot of stakeholders. So that was a useful skill. I must say today at Hiscox, conversely, I find it easier to get things done because you need to rely on fewer stakeholders, and that's the advantage of being more of a medium-sized company rather than one of the giants. Yeah. Cool.
And looking back on, your formative years of childhood, I mean, were there any values that you learned then that you still use today in your leadership role?
Probably, I guess, these formative years are really important. I think maybe it's something that struck us as a family is when I was 7, we were in a car accident.
Wow.
And it was sort of late 70s, so they didn't have a seatbelt on the rear seats. And so I was with my sister. She was sort of lying down, and she just rolled, and I was fine. But I hit the back of the head of my dad quite badly, and I spent quite a bit of time in the hospital. It was a bit touch and go for a while. Anyway, what happened is it was a head-on collision, and the people in the other car, big Mercedes, they'd gone over the line basically, and they were in a hurry because they were going to a party, and they were very well to do. And one thing that shocked us as a family is that they didn't even step out of the car to see what had happened.
My goodness. What, they just drove on?
Well, it just again, we're late for dinner sort of thing. And I think maybe a bit of the formative thing was, thinking about how you behave as a human, even if, you're quite privileged and so on. And I think I think the way you treat people at work, the way you treat assistants, the way you treat people on the way up and versus on the way down. That's what I think is really, really important. And again, I think being many of us are very privileged where you sort of choose also where you work, having a company that has got a good sort of no jerks policy and people, or good antibodies when these people pop up. I think that's really, really important. I think so I don't know, I'm certainly no saint and don't want to, but I think trying to also, and the way you treat people, I think is really, really important. And you can be a hard taskmaster and get people to deliver, but that only works for so long, for a short burst. If you really want to deliver sustainable results, having the hearts and mind of your people and treating them right, I think it's really important. So I think that maybe that's one of the lessons from a
absolutely. If you were to pin it down to one characteristic that's enabled you to be the successful leader that you are now, what would it be?
Maybe a couple, if I may. The first one is I think I've always been curious and I get bored quite quickly. So I like to look at new things, and that suits me well for the risk job. But also means that I can look into an area, do a deep dive, come out and so on, try to summarize it for people. So I think that's a good attribute. I think maybe more learning about how I've been managed in the past and how I like to be managed, and thinking, what makes a good leader, a good manager. I mean, what I do, particularly at Hiscox, given the different business units we have and so on, I try to set broad parameters, but I recruit a really talented team, and then they've got quite a long leash within these parameters, because again, they've been recruited because they're good at what they're doing, and don't want to be on their back all the time. Conversely, when they're new, I would spend more time, have more frequent one-to-ones, check on them more regularly. But when they're established, it's probably a bit more of a coaching sort of relationship, and coming in when there's potential conflict or when they're a bit in doubt. But again, trying to make sure that they've got the agency, they use their brain, and frankly, they do it sometimes differently to how we do it, but right for the business environment that they're in. Again, the 5 business units, each of the CRO of the business unit will have a slightly different approach, and I think that's great.
And that's managing the team and sort of hiring the best people that you possibly can. How do you manage upwards or manage other people around that table, that board table, who much more influence, persuasion in terms of that relate? How do you manage those people, the CEO, the CFO, the chair, for example? What's your style there?
Well, managing them might be a little bit, a bit of a grand word for, but certainly sort of developing meaningful relationship. I mean, the truth is in the risk role, we've got very little actual power. We can sometimes intervene when we outside of risk appetite, people misbehave and so on. But it's like a nuclear button. You don't want to use it too often. So most of the time, it's advisory mode, really, and again, it's thinking what can you bring to the person in risk. One of the limitations of the functions is the function that tend to be small, typically 1% of headcount of a company. But conversely, it means that you got access to a lot of information that circulates quite quickly, so you can join the dots, and again, you can get to you can get to other managers, around the C-suite and say, well, do you realize that there's a dependency there? Do you realize you can join forces with that person and get it delivered? And I think for the board, I mean, certainly, Hiscox, the company is growing. We FTSE 100. There's a lot of expectations there, and I think the main reason why I was recruited is having come from larger organizations to bring a certain level of maturity. But also the board, I think, turned to the CRO to get a little bit the unvarnished truth sometimes, because when you sit on the board, I mean, everything that comes to you has been filtered, and everything is green, and because usually you've been an exec before, managed projects and the like, that it's not the reality. So I think there's an element of trust that is really important to develop with the board, which is it's a fine line, isn't it? Because you're part of the management team, and so you got that management solidarity, but at the same time, you got to be truthful to the board. You got to be transparent with the regulator. So that makes it really interesting in terms of balancing these different needs.
And how do you, in terms of the mindset, the skill set to maybe deliver bad news, or not be that yes person to the wider board in terms of, all the information has been filtered. How do you handle that? What sort of skill set, mindset do you need to sort of put yourself in that position to deliver, hold up a mirror, for want of a better phrase?
Well, I think, the worst thing is to surprise people. So you want to make sure that for example, there might be times where you disagree with another exec. Sometimes you might even disagree with the CEO. It's better when you come as an exec team from the board that you're united, but sometimes it's just a matter of judgment and opinion. And I think it's quite useful to say, this is the view of one person, this is the view of the other, this is why there is a difference. As a board, you've got a lot of experience. Can you help us work through that? I think you'd better get your facts right, because otherwise you might have a tough time. But frankly, it's quite rare that you would have a major disagreement. But I think at the same time, it's important that people know that the control function are there with the background to surface issues when they need to be surfaced. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning, in independent insurance, what they were doing within independent insurance, and that's well documented, is basically they had a whiteboard where they would put in claims, and if the CEO didn't like what he meant for the results, he would just wipe claims away from the board, obviously not from reality, and that's what caught up with them. And at the end, the signing actuary sort of wrote to the board and said the numbers don't add up, and so you need to maintain that integrity.
And have you had a sort of an Achilles heel in your own skill set that you've had to overcome to sort of enable you to be where you are to get today?
Certainly. Trying to think of just one. No, just one. I think I think just thinking, some of it, some of the harder discussions, they're really about business. They're not about people. And I think probably when I was earlier in my career, I would take things maybe a little bit too much to heart, basically, and trying to have a little bit of distance and sleep on things and reflect maybe a bit a bit more, because I mean you put a lot of energy into your work, and setbacks. I think I've been quite lucky in my career. I haven't had too many setbacks, so maybe I'm not that good at handling them. I would say I got a bit tougher. with over the years with that.
But that's it's a really. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who may be listening into this who also struggle with setbacks. I mean, are there any practical tips that you would give to those listening that to get over it? Because it is tough if you're working on a project and it's not quite gone to plan, or people don't quite buy into your vision. It's frustrating. How do you kind of from a practical standpoint get over it, other than a good night's sleep?
Yeah, well, I think maybe one of the things that was in hindsight a weakness was I would over-index on negative feedback or something going on. I would lose some sort of sense of perception. So 99 things would be positive, and then there would be one thing that would be negative, and I would lose sense.
To add on that,
a little bit.
And I think a lot of people do actually.
Right. And some people talk about being perfectionist or whatever. And then conversely, I'm thinking, a lot of business decisions sometimes get made with no information, and so if your accuracy is 51%, well, it's better than the 50% of tossing a coin, sort of thing. So try to put it a little bit in perspective, and so that's maybe something I've sort of learned over time
to overcome.
And also thinking, again. You're rarely on your own, in that you might find that there were people that didn't speak up, but they were also unsure, potentially on your side, and so on, and try to see whether, I guess, maybe you were completely wrong, and so you're in the camp of one, but that's rarely the case, I think. And then finding out maybe how you put if it's an issue that is really important. How you go back to it with better arguments, maybe more of a coalition around it, maybe a more nuanced approach, or conversely, whether it's just something that is trivial and you should just let it go, frankly.
And do you feel you've totally overcome that, or is it still it's always a work in progress?
I think it's always work in progress now.
That's actually very reassuring to hear that it's the same, because I'm sure many people, it's a very common theme, I think. And equally, looking back on the course of your career, which has been, very interesting career as we've discussed. But if you were to think of one example of a failure, people approach failure, with different perspectives. They are learnings, but what's been your greatest learning, or conversely failure?
Yeah, I think there's one time when. The technical sort of setup was about apportioning capitals to different lines of business. So that was quite tricky, because this was a nil-sum game, and there were winners and losers. So obviously the losers were not happy, and we had to explain to one of the losers, if you want to, what was happening technically, and my boss at the time was quite new. He didn't understand risk. He'd been a very successful finance professional, but he didn't have a good risk understanding. So I didn't have a great relationship with him, and the person that we're trying to convince. In fact, I had quite a good relationship with them, but my boss wanted to handle that. So anyway, I think we spent 14 versions of a deck with my team to sort of come up with something that the boss thought was good enough to present to the other person. And in fact, we did it so many times. By the time we got the deck right in the eyes of my boss at the time, the other person had left. And I felt, this is like so much time has been wasted. It didn't deliver anything. I've just put my team through. So that I felt was a real failure. And in hindsight, I thought, especially given I had a good relationship with the person we were trying to convince, maybe I should just have forced sort of, but would say, let's have a meeting, the three of us, and thrash it out and so on. And we would have avoided a lot of that. But again, the dynamic with my boss was not great. So I don't know. Maybe the learning from this is, you always need to make sure you recruit a good boss for yourself.
Yeah. And also the relationship piece, I guess.
Right,
yeah. How valuable they are.
Mm-hmm.
And just from an industry perspective, the industry is evolving kind of all the time. What do you think are some of the challenges facing leaders in the insurance industry today and kind of over the coming years?
Yeah, I think it's really hard today because there's a lot of noise and sort of a lot of frost, so sort of to cut through that. I mean, for me, what we're doing from a risk point of view, we're trying to identify sort of big trends and what they mean for the world. So I'll give you a few examples. We hear about the world getting more fragmented, less international trade. Well, that means that we need to make sure we play also locally in the SME market, which is something that we do at Hiscox. So maybe, with tariffs, we'll have less business coming into the London market, but we'll have more business coming through OSMEs in the US and in Europe and so on, defense spending, that sort of thing being produced. So geopolitics being one. I think there's also thinking about aging and both in terms of our customers and the needs that they have maybe more discerning customers, maybe customers that put more of an onus on good service, which is Hiscox has got good reputation in that space. We also obviously climate big thing for insurers and scenarios there around liability. So again, how do you position your products and your offering is an important one. So I mean there's a lot. The aging too means there's the skills that we've got within the insurance industry. I think that's a real challenge because the big generations that are retiring. We're competing for digital talent, for example, with some of the large firms. So how do we make sure that insurance is an exciting sector for people to work in? So quite a few challenges. I think we need to focus a bit more on the long-term trends rather than things that are announced in the morning, and by the time you go to bed they're sort of gone away. So.
And just on those skills, what are the evolving skills that you think you as a leader and sort of the industry and business need to think about beyond obviously the technical risk, underwriting, finance qualifications that one would need for those sorts of positions?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I think also it's changed over time because you look at operational risk and resilience. It's very, very big now on the agenda, alongside maybe the more technical aspects that you were listing. And the way I think about it is to make sure that we've got people that are curious, that are good at synthesizing information, that are good at having empathy with the people that we advise, and in a way, I think that's usually where there's the biggest difference in colleagues, the ability to communicate. I mean, we've got people that know the area of specialism, and sometimes you can get them from like an 8 to a 9. Okay, great. But you sort of times that by the ability to communicate, and if they are on a 4 versus an 8, that makes a massive difference. So that's where I look more about the the potential of candidates and how they can present information, engage with people, the intellectual sort of agility of candidates. Can they jump from one topic to the next without being too phased by it? I mean, also there's basic stuff here, but we as the risk function, people sort of turn to you also at a time of crisis. So I guess you got to be sort of relatively calm and collected, because if you start to shout fire, that's not a good place to be. So
and just following on from that, what advice would you give to young people coming into the market today that have aspirations, ambitions to become a chief executive, a chief risk officer, get to the C-suite, get to that leadership position? What advice would you give to young people entering the market?
I think what I find is that people are really generous with their time. And if you say, can I spend half a day shadowing you? Can I have half an hour in your diary just to understand what you work on? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities for a graduate or someone early in their career? People are usually very welcoming. They might say, no, sorry, I can't do it next week, but talk to my assistant and I'll slot you in by the end of the month. I think the network is massively important. When you start, you come to the city, for example, it's quite daunting. You don't know anyone, but then you meet people. You just talk about coffee, and you find some common ground. And I think it's really I think it's really worth investing in your network early on, and also as you progress, so do the peers that you have in the industry. So that's how you grow your network. And I think maybe also it's quite good on a regular basis to have a little bit of an MOT of where you are in your career. Thinking, am I in a part of the business that is really strategic in terms of the delivery of the company? So are you more likely to be in the limelight? Hopefully you do a good job when you're in the limelight. But that's important, and because it also means that you're more likely to get noticed and to be given the means of doing a good job. Are you learning? If you're not learning, especially early in your career, you're going to peak quite quickly. Do you enjoy the people you're working with? Do you like your manager? Do you like the people, your peers, potentially the staff that you have? Are you fairly compensated? But I think that again, that's one of the criteria. I don't think it should be the only one, because if you chase money all the time, you'll always find someone that pays a bit more. The job might not be more interesting, and sometimes you see a bit of job hopping, which I think is not a great way of building a career, because you don't learn enough through it. So I think maybe taking time. I tend to eat myself sort of at your end when you reflect on what you've done during the year and the year coming in. I think that can be a good way of saying, okay, have I outgrown the role basically, and do I need to do something different, progression or lateral, just to continue to develop myself.
Really good advice. Thank you. And the final question that we ask our guests is, so Fabrice, we know you walk into work. If you're listening to your headphones, do you have a go-to song that you use to motivate you for the day ahead?
Yeah, I think there's probably one group I like in the UK. It's a bit of an old group, but it's the Kings, and I like Sunny Afternoon in particular, because
especially with the weather's like
exactly, like it's very seasonal too. But the way I think about it is, it's largely around sort of a poor guy that's lost everything to the taxman. I sort of park that. I was thinking it's more about even if you've got like the money in a position in life, his girlfriend has also left him, and so he's not in a good place, but still he's enjoying sort of a sunny afternoon on a good day. And I think for me, I think the tune is quite upbeat, and I think it also puts things in perspective about thinking it's a bit like maybe in the Rudyard Kipling thing, if you can lose everything, you'll be a man, that sort of thing. So
that's a great
point. Just going back to what makes you happy, basically.
A great way to end the podcast, the interview. Always keep things in perspective. But thank you for your time.
Fabrice, it's been brilliant having you on. Thank you very much.